Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi katu. Lil Ikhwani Fati fi Afrika, Europa, America, Caribbean, wa kulli makan. Wassalamu ala mani tabahuda lil Ikhwani Fati fi Afrika, wa Europa, America, Caribbean, wa kulli makan. Halim wa salim bikum, Anzarama, kulli makan. My dear brothers, thank you for those who will show up today and those who show up in the future. And I'm continuing my series here on Egypt is Ours. And I've uncovered some other additional facts that you should be made aware of. The 5 identifiers, there's a little bit more than that, but these five great ones is overwhelming evidence that you can use yourself in countering the racists who continue to pound on us by telling us that we are wrong, that Kemet had nothing to do with black folk at all. And matter of fact, I was just reading some document. It reminded me when I was in university. Oh man, how many decades ago now? So many decades ago. And they used to, even the professors before I transferred to a real African department, African studies department where I had black teachers. And these professors constantly called us Negroes all the time, even though it's in modern times, they still refer to us Negroes. And when we had literature was laden with the word Negro in it. So this is going to be an ongoing problem, especially when you start your scholarship on Egypt. Don't get discouraged, or any parts of Africa, because the dominant thing is those who will talk against your involvement and against your involvement in achievements of Africa. But things like slavery, things we do wrong, they champion that. You find thousands of things of scholarship on that, and they will quickly tell you they were Negroes, they were black. But the accomplishments, they have now whitewashed this. So with that said, brothers and sisters, I tell you, our history is so rich, and ancient Kemet is no different. It's the bread and butter of all civilizations, and it's the greatest civilizations that we had seen on this earth. We haven't had anything close to it since that time. The Islamic empires is a different situation, and in that this took on a different avenue from that of our brothers who were in Kemet, because Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is preparing the world for its end. So he's now putting the last piece, which is Islam, on the earth. Those who follow it will be rewarded. Those who don't will not be rewarded. So we're at that point. And so each messenger had his own mission and whatnot. And remember, I talked about this last week about the prophets and so forth. Who was this prophet who's instrumental in giving us the Tawheed? Because we were once first had Tawheed, as you heard me talk about, and gave you evidence to that. And so this is a very, very interesting phenomenon. So I'm going to look at this. We'll start getting into this now. And I'm going to start here about the Fulani people. There's a big contention, brothers and sisters, about okay, here. Now, let me get this part out here now. Okay. What is interesting here, brothers and sisters, this is a map, and there's, the Fulani community, the Fula community is, most of us are in disagreement to our origins. Some say it's straight out Europe. Others say Asia. Majority do say Africa. Some say we were originated from the West, which is not true. And so here I drew something out for you to show you something about this aspect. I'm going to get to the Hausa part in this as well, but I want to show you something about how, again, as you heard me say many times, everything that deals with Africa, especially from the South Central upwards, the Fulani have a hand in it. And Kemet is no different. If you see the green, we're coming from the cradle of mankind. We went up through Egypt, and then we did go into the Middle East. This is contention of some of our scholars, that we did go into Jazira Arab, but we were black, not Tuba. There, we mastered the art of cattle raising. In the blue, it shows us leaving there to go into Kemet. Then, when the Exodus occurred, it shows us in the red going all of these areas, which covers 3/4 of Africa. So we played a very integral role in this. And I'm going to show you some pictures of, again, we don't have all the documentation, but we know the European libraries have a lot because they stole a lot of information and we can't get to it because they deliberately want to hold this. Because if it glorified them, you can better rest assured all these documents will be released. We know Putin, to his credit, released documents on his end, showing from way back the Europeans considered Jesus, Egyptians, and the Egyptians as what? Black people. And he's made it now law to where the Black Jesus, will be in the churches. And pictures will be in the real image that they knew of, that it was given to them, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So we know the Europeans are sitting on gold mine information that they won't release because they stole documents, they stole ornaments, they stole gold, silver. They just went crazy, and they put them in their museum, and some are private museums. And all the while, the same Tubab European countries are, making sure that we are denigrated. So they hide the truth from us. And so the matter of cattle is a big issue in Kemet in ancient times. If the Fula people are masters of cattle herding, how did they get that? See, and again, we had to come from somewhere. And so we know that cattle herding was a major occupation in Kemet. And again, the people depended on those who herded cattle for milk and leather and meat and so forth and so on. And we also know that this cattle, when it opened up the Sahara, as we not understand it today, when it opened up, it became lush and green. The Fula came across with their cattle because we have evidence to show the cattle and our presence in the Sahara and in the Savannah regions, the Delta regions, for a long time, thousands of years. The key that I always want to know is that if they took the DNA of the cattle, could we trace that cattle back to the Kemet? This is the contention I also have. And so this here is an important factor here because it shows that Kemet had because they need meat and so forth. Someone had to take care of this cattle, and cattle was, got to some parts of its history, they worshiped the cattle. You remember the story, what happened to Moses, alayhi salam, what happened with him when he went to up in Mount Sinai, and they began to revert back to their old ways, and they branded a golden calf. Remember that? So, the cattle and the worship of cattle was a big, big issue. And so this here, brothers and sisters, is a indication that the Fula was there doing that. We also know that Fula had kings, but the thing is, because of the linguistics and stuff, we're tied in a lot. And I'll get into Hausa, how Hausa played a role in this, and the linguistics, because we know that the Fula dialects, okay, have a lot of Bantu in it. We know that. And we also know that the racists who are trying to say the European dialects have nothing to do with African dialects. That is absolute. When you read that, it's absolute hogwash. The Fula language is African based, and of course developed in the Middle East. But not thinking that you think today when you see Jordanians and the Iraqis and white Arabs. No. The black people were there. According to Herodias' testimony, what he said when he traveled through that whole region about 440 years before Jesus was born, there were no quote unquote white people. There was none. See, so this is a contention. And again, brothers and sisters, what I find interesting is that they placed a premium on the cattle. And again, the Fula were masters of herding and farming and getting byproducts from the cattle. This was an important aspect in the Egyptian economy. Again, the Fula, okay, it's speculated, played a hell of a role in developing and enriching Kemet. And I can imagine what happened when they decided to leave Kemet and go into Exodus, when all of these clans of the Fula took their cattle and went across the Sahara, and then we know where they went. They went across to North Africa. They went the Savannah region, the coastal West Africa. They went down south, South Central. They went everywhere with their cattle. So that is something, brothers and sisters, again, that you should. Those who are Fulani, you have your say in this matter. The King's List is a very, very interesting one. We're still, even to this day, trying to decipher all names, because why? The names have been mishandled. Some have been left off deliberately. We know in the Akan language and also in the language that was the King's List, we know, and I'll write this out to you here. We know this word here, ote, ote, means the list of kings. Okay, we know this. It means the King's List. The King's List have names. And in the King's List, we have a lot of history. Okay, a lot of history in this. And so, again, like I said, if we can get all the documents, which a lot of it was destroyed too when the Roman Church sent its soldiers there to destroy the suppositories, destroy all the books, and kill off all the scribes. But again, as you know, we found thousands and thousands of documents. When the colonial period came, the colonial power, especially the British and the French in particular, they began to steal. They start to find all of this stuff to show that Black people had scholarship. In order to keep us stupid in Africa and in the Americas, they hoarded all of this evidence of our achievements in our education and sciences, medicine, everything, and they put it in safety vaults, like Putin, like he said. They put that stuff away so nobody would see it. And all the while, for how many centuries, they lambasted us and say that we were nothing, that we were slaves. We were eating, only thing we could do was jump in between trees and eat bananas. We had no writing systems. We had a language that was only decipherable by other animals, and so forth and so on. Then they used this to justify enslaving and killing us and colonizing us. All the while, they had the real documents of Kemet. They had all the writing systems of the Fula, the Mende, the Mendinka, the Bombara script. There's the Halanta script. There's all of these scripts that came out of ancient Egypt, they had all this stuff and they hid it. See, so this is a situation, brothers and sisters, where it's very, very sad. And let me get there. Our brothers here. Thank you, dear brother. Salam alaikum, my dear brother Bill. And salam alaikum, my dear brother Henry. Thank you for showing up. And our dear brother here, Marcus. Be sure you guys get a hold of him. And here you hear his podcast. And please follow this brother and network with him because this brother here presents a very good bird's eye view of history. He's been doing a lot of concentration in the north, going all the way down to South Africa. I'm waiting for the time when he hits South Africa, because I like South Africa as well, especially Azania, as we call South Africa. And my favorite in that region was the Zulus. I mean, I was fascinated by the Zulus as well and whatnot. And he's going to probably touch on that, inshallah ta'ala. So thank you all, brothers, and those in the future that will show up. I appreciate that. Now, brothers and sisters, we're going to get into something too. The 5 identifiers. This is the overwhelming evidence, brothers and sisters. Not how much we can yell, how much we can scream, and how much we can deceive. Because you have racists from all over. You have black, white Tubab. Black Tubab. You have Tubab. You have Tubab Egyptians, Tubab Arabs. You have even Tubab Asians are in this discussion now, denouncing us. So, and again, they are very slick. They concentrate only on the Roman and Greeks who came as colonizers and warriors and so forth. And they take their DNA. That's what they concentrate on. Then their ancestral scholars, they took their documents to change it even more by changing the names to make the names fit more European-like. Then they turn back around and reintroduce those documents with European names in order to whiten Kemet. We know this. See, we know this. But what happened was when the documents were uncovered in recent times, there were black folk also who got access to this. And this is what's changed everything, because when our scholars, especially like from Ghana, began to examine and learn how to read the hieroglyphics, they began to see things on number one, linguistics, because again, the Europeans don't speak any African dialects. And when they uncovered these documents on the papyri papers and on the hieroglyphics and so forth and so on, they began to see these African languages from the West, from coastal West Africa in particular, especially the Akan and Ga, and also Igbo and also Mende and Hausa as well. The linguistics tie us in to West Africa, Kemet and West Africa, and some parts of Central Africa as well. It ties us in. But the bulk of the exodus went to West Africa. We know this. And we know the linguistics was Akan, was the primary language, lingua franca, that was spoken through Kemet. We know this. And we know that the King's List, as you saw me put on the chat there, Ote, that's what it's called, Ote. It's what they call the King's List. The Ote, if you look at the names, of course, when the Europeans, don't go by with the Europeans, because the Europeans changed all the names to fit French and English and so forth. But when they got the Book of the Dead and historical documents, they found these Akan names. And I'll get into some of these names to show you how this, you have to ask the question. Again, brothers and sisters, if we had nothing to do with Kemet, how is it that the Kemet history names of cities you find in West Africa? The kings that you know in the King's List, you find them, the same names in where? West Africa. you find the Hebrews and Jews who quote unquote supposed to be Hebrew and Jews. And I explained to you last week what happened, how we got to be named us, Black Africans, be called Jews and Hebrews. Okay. And then when the Europeans came to accept Judaism, converts, they began to intermarry some. We know that as well. And they also took the names of our patriarchs, as you heard me say. And then they came to the Middle East as Jews, okay, in a later period. That's a new period. Their brothers now have started to disappear to go south because the Romans appeared. And so when they came into the Middle East, they assumed the identities a lot of their Jewish, quote unquote Jewish and Hebrew brothers who were Black. And they took those names, but they began to change the names by modern times in order to fit. When they went back into Europe, they changed the names again. Barkowitz. See, that's the one that's famous. Barkowitz. We got brothers that are named Barkow. I told you that I'll show you some more lists here. It's more convincing about a lot of this. But linguistics, brothers and sisters, we know the Khan language is spoken. We know archaic Ga was spoken. We know also that there was Hausa, there was Fula, there was also Igbo and Yoruba spoken as well. We know Mende was spoken because as Black people began to come into Kemet, into the civilizations. Now they were separated, and what happened when people separate? They begin to develop their own dialects, don't they? You know this is the case. When people begin to a genetic drift happens, maybe they spoke the same Akan at one time, but then they disappeared and got away from each other for centuries upon centuries. They developed their own language. This is what has happened. How we got all these different languages, especially in West Africa, but they all are related. And the same thing with Kemet. See, this is what makes it very, very, very interesting. And then we look at the linguistic part of this because this is a factor. When someone comes to you to tell you about the Europeans, the Tubab coming in to rule the land, yes, they came as colonized, but they were not indigenous. You ask them about the languages. You ask these Tubab, ask them a question. You say, okay, you see them on these sites, and they run it, and on YouTube, some of it is out and out ridiculous. So you ask a question, what language is spoken? When they say no one knows, it's a lie. You start to give them evidence. See, you start to give them evidence. I'll give you some of it today, again. And you start giving, so wait a minute, how can we have a Khan language in Kemet? You say you don't know anything about these languages. How is that? Netta is the name that was given in hieroglyphics of what was used again, and it comes derived out from Akan and other African dialects, meaning the language of the gods, not meaning gods plural, meaning the strength of meaning gods like, being a tribute. It's called the language of the gods, okay? Now, and we know that these languages were spoken because we have the documentation to prove this. The second was the DNA. You saw me talk about the DNA here, and I had another guy that wrote me, and it was, again, these are provocateurs. And he came with this same thing again. No, you got it wrong. We got Europeans who gave us the real story. I asked him, I said, can you explain to me if you looked at my tape? He said he refused to look at it because he said it was no good. It was wrong. I mean, the same crap. So I said to him, can you explain to me again? And if you write me back, explain to me about the E series. How is the E series and the L series that's tied to the mother side and the maternal side, and the E series is tied to the paternal side? So how you explain that? And you find these E series all the way in West Africa. How is that? See, and I got into it about that. And I was very polite with him, but I wanted to make sure that he understood that he was not talking to a child. He didn't answer me. See, okay, we got comment who we got here. How you doing? How you doing, my dear brother? Albino people, light-skinned people are not African. Well, you know what? I don't know why you come with this. I don't know what you're talking about now. We're not talking about something to are not African. We got albinos. All of us who are here in Africa, especially our brothers who live in West Africa, we have albino people in West Africa, and they are Africans. It's just that they have a malfunction in the melanin. Anybody understands how you get albino people can be white, they can be European, they can be Africans, and there's a malfunction in the immune system that causes the melanin not to develop. We have Africans, especially in Mali, I know that, and in the corridor, the western corridor of the Sahel, we have many people who are albino because of this malfunction, but they're Africans. So I don't know. You say you're a research channel, but you know, as I said before, I'm not going to play with you. I'm getting that stuff out of here. That's ridiculous, because that's an insult to all of us who live here in Africa, knowing that albino people, just because they lost the melanin in the skin, they're not African. That's ridiculous. That's not right. Okay. And I'm going to get into something too about these. No. Excuse me. I'm going to go back to I got to get this out. The DNA. We got the proof. These are identifiers. The DNA, brothers, sisters. When you go on these chats or you go into a site and you into arguments or people arguing, you give them about the DNA. Now, some will try to fool you because they'll say, "Oh, yeah, there's an M series." What the Europeans have done now is they've changed, because there's many E series, right? There's E1B and a whole bunch, as you know, you saw my chart, there's many different E series, right? They removed the E and put M only. This is another way of them trying to take this away, so it's as though these people are just, nobody else in the world matches them. That's not true. But you give them the DNA evidence. This is important, as you know. Third is the eyewitness testimony. You can't get past when they don't want to look at you because they say you're black, you're Afrocentric, I can't hear you, I don't want to listen to you, what you say is a lie. So I say, okay, how about your own people? You're Tubab, you're black Tubab? Okay, fine. Look, how about your own people here, the Europeans? Europeans gave us testimony about what the people were in Kemet. This is important. And many scientists today still ignore Herodias, who they consider to be the father of deception and traitor, because he refused to whitewash Egypt and all of the Middle East as we understand today. In his journal, he wrote an extensive journal, and it was very, very in-depth, and he gave us an eyewitness account. And there's others, European scholars, also scientists, who came across and they did write the right things. But in modern times, we have many who didn't, because they start to bring forth this theory of Ham, and they're black, but they're not African, but they are closer to European, but they, even though their skin is like that of African, all this confusion, so that way they can get you out of Africa. So we know this. Now, the other is the hieroglyphics. Brothers and sisters, one of the greatest of all is actually the word Kemet. That word means black. See, this again, and the Europeans know it because it's written everywhere. Even our brothers 3,005, almost 5,000 years ago, still had this Afrocentric in them, and this black nationalism in them. And they call themselves Kemet, and meaning their land. This is their land. Kemet. This is a word they use a lot for black. That is identifier. Again, when you encounter the racist, you ask them, well, what about the word Kemet? Let them try to decipher that word, because they'll say, no, it's Egypt, or it's this, or it's that. No, in hieroglyphics, it's Kemet. And in the language of the old, the ancient dialects of Kemet, this word was used and is there in hieroglyphics. That's an identifier. Secondly, to the identifier is they show you the boats that come from the mouth of the Nile, which we know as the Nile. And we have the names of that. It's been translated into English, but I won't give you that because there's a lot. I can go into a lot of translations, but I don't want to bore you with that. But the Nile River, it showed them coming from there and finding their resting place, going in and crossing the cataracts. As we, you know, that as you go through the Nile, we call them cataracts. And I told you before, the lower cataracts mean what? Northern Egypt. Excuse me, I always get that confused myself. I'm starting to get old. The upper cataracts is southern Egypt, because remember the river flows against the gravity, goes upwards, say against the gravity. But those evidences there are big. But that Kemet is major, brothers and sisters, is major. And also describing themselves, that you can't get past that. If the people were European, why would they describe themselves as black? It doesn't make sense. Herodias, who is European himself, made a big difference between him and them, because he said, I don't know what to call these people. They're burnt by the sun. They got hair that's, crispy. He didn't know how to describe us, and nose and lips and body, contours and so forth and so on. This is some of the things, brothers, that it should help you. Number 5, the melon testing and hair testing. This is the other that you can't pass. Sheikh Diop, he's now passed on, and he had developed a test. And this test took the skins of the ancient Egyptians plus the invaders. And they were assigned numbers. They had a test for this, and they assigned the numbers. The Europeans, they were taken, they had a number that was lower, meaning they had less melanin. He proved that they were Europeans, plus not only that, the skulls, and there's other factors, ornaments that were found to show you they originated out of Greece, out of Europe, okay? No doubt about that. But the test for the native and the royal mummies and so forth, they had a high number of melanin that shows they were black people. And then the hair testing, again, developed by a Jewish scientist. He went to the Roman, Greek cemeteries. He took their strains of hair that he found in their grave sites, right? He took strains of hair. He developed a test, and he had numbers going up to 100. The higher the number, the straighter the hair. The more kinkier the hair, the lower the number. And he had parameters from 50 up, most human beings. 50 and lower are black people. No doubt about that. And 60 and 65 also, because now they're mixtures and so forth and so on, maybe closer to 70. But when you get up to 75, 80, 85, 90, 95%, and 100%, that's all European. The royal mummies, the Roman and Greek kings that came to rule and colonize, they had high numbers. 75, 80, 85%, 90%, 100%, their hair was straight, European. But the royal mummies and the population, some of our brothers had a score of 25. That means their hair was so tight, so kinky. That's why they had all these hairstyles. You African Americans and those in Europe and Canada and the West Indies today, you braid your hair, you do all kinds of stuff. You think that's new? Our people were doing it in Kemet a long time ago too. And they showed these on hieroglyphics as well, that we had mastered our hair to where we can, especially the woman, she can do many things to it. And braiding was one of them. So that's nothing new. Okay, corn rolls and all that kind of stuff, they were doing that way back. That's, again, enough evidence, brothers, to help you in your fight. Not arguing, not screaming with the people. When people come up with stupid stuff, you give them evidence. If they refuse to take it, no problem. You move on. Okay, here we go here. Divide and conquer doesn't work anymore. Yes, as we start to get ourselves together and break away from the vestiges of slavery and colonization, we're starting to get better. But we still have a long way to go, brothers and sisters, and we have to do our part. And a lot of it is education. Once we begin to feel good about ourselves, okay, then we'll be able to really lead. But right now, we have the Tuba powers are smart. They take the weakest among us and they put us in power. And they carry on the legacy of their slave masters. We know that. Because we have evidence of this, is because of one of the major prima facie evidence against our black leaders here on this continent is citizenship. Tubac walks in, Russians walk in, Chinese walk in, even many Indians walk into the country, they get citizenship. Me, other African Americans, only a few here and there get it. If you're a prominent scholar of Islam, you won't get it. You won't even be able to make entry. These are the slavery things that I'm talking about that we have to get rid of. I gave you an example, and if we have Nigerian brothers here, they can tell you what's going on in Abuja and Lagos. We have Chinese who made entry. Easy for them to come in the country. Me? No. They'll fight me for that. They'll say, oh, you know, we got reports you linked to terror. You know, I've heard this many times, and it's ridiculous. And I always ask the question. I say, you can bring any of your services here to Fez, Morocco, and I've been here 2 decades. You show me my Mujahideen group, army. You show me all the weapons I have stored. You show me all the contacts I've made with quote unquote ISIS and all these others. There's nothing like that because I hate them. See? And yet we have this colonial mentality. So we still have the people in power who are advocating for, who are, we know as proxies for the Tubac, and they're still dividing us. How you doing, my dear sister? Thank you for showing up. Salam alaikum. Thank you, my dear sister, for showing up. Really appreciate that. And why don't you mention Eritrea, that region? You're more more ancient Egyptian than a Khan. Okay, my dear brother, I think you should look at my tapes previously, because I gave you there's no, how can I say, the ancient Egyptians are Akan people. The ancient Egyptians are Mende and Fula and Hausa and everything. I'm gonna get to that to show you why I say that. So there's no ancient Egyptian, meaning he's different from any of the Africans. See? And matter of fact, I read a document today. I was looking at this thing. They were talking about, remember the Mozab people? I've been talking about them in other classes. I told my mother. It shows my mother also linked to Mozab. Mozab people were from what? Ancient Egypt. And the women we know carried the L series. We know that, right? The Mozab people became the who? The Amazigh. Everybody calls Berber. They became the Amazigh people. The Amazigh people left ancient Kemet with L series. And men left a lot with also E series. See? So that, I will go back and look at that, because there's no such thing as an ancient Egyptian who is not a West African. Because if you saw my chart, and I do it for this brother because I've never seen this brother before here. I'll give, here, and I'll let him look at this, so that way he can see this, and and I'll move on. And okay, yeah. Now this is what I'm talking about here, my dear brother, who I think whatever you want to call your name there, my dear brother. Here is evidence what I'm talking about. There's no distinct ancient Kemet race, because they are linked to West Africans. This here gives you the indication of the E series. You see this E series, they're E1s, they're EM, there's EV. All of these are related to the West Africans in particular. That's why the West Africans and the African Americans and the Caribbeans, we're all ancient Egyptians, because we carry on our father's side, okay, this particular gene, this genotype. So this here shows you that the ancient Egyptians were Black and from West Africa. It's just that we do not know what, like in my case, I have more of the Fulani, and I have Mozab. I'm more than that than anything else. Some other our brothers here we know are, we know that they are, Mende, or they're Hausa and so forth and so on. So we have that. My heritage is more of the Fulani side, even though my dad's side, I know we have the Igbo and so forth and so on. But I recognize my mom's side, which is traditional and African, and lineages. My mother's heritage and her kinship and so forth and so on. We know it came out of ancient Egypt as well. We know that. So my dear brother who was making this comment here, I would suggest that you go back, review my tapes, and then look at that. And then Eritrea, there's no such thing as Eritrea. Eritrea is part of Nubia because all that was one big kingdom. And I also suggest that you look at our brother Marcus. Here you get a hold of him, get it on his subscribe to him, his podcast. He breaks down the thing about Nubia as well. So there was no Eritrea. All that was developed by the Europeans to divide us, okay, and all that. In ancient times, we were known as that area as the Nubia, Kush, and so forth. There was no such thing as Eritrea. So I wanted to take time, brothers and sisters, to give our brother here some food for thought, and I'll let him do his research. And if he wants to get back with us here, he can, and so forth and so on. But I gave you evidence, my dear brother. So I hope that if you do respond back with something that's more correct and so forth. So that way we can take it on. And also, my dear brother, let me suggest something to you. I don't know what your nationality. I don't care if you're white, black. I don't care what your denomination is. But here, I prefer that when people come, you greet all your people, the people here in chat and myself, because this is what we should do in African customs. I don't care what someone else does on their other channel. I don't care about that. I'm an elder, and I'm a Muslim, and I'm African. And I know even if you say, well, I'm Christian, this and that, well, you better look at the prophet you say you follow, and you say you follow Jesus. Okay, what did he say? Jesus always greet disciples and people with shalom. This has been proven. He greet the people with shalom. So African people, we always have a way of greeting one another. This is what we're going to do here, because I prefer to do this. So we use that, and please greet your brothers first when you first come in, and then start in your thing. Okay, Hotep. I think we're going to have some problems here. Okay, let me start back here now. Now I'm going to get into this part here too, brothers and sisters. This here is for, now we're going to get into some of the genetics, about some of the things about our worship. John the Baptist, we know him as Yahya in the Quran. And Jesus, we know him as Yahya. We know him, as Isa, okay? In the transposition of the name, they belong to the Sunni people. That's proven. All the Christian scholars talk about that. They were very religious, orthodox. We would call them fundamentalists today, okay? Fundamentalists in Tawheed and oneness of God. We know that. But all of the prophets and so forth have clans that belong to the Akan people. Because here we go again. We have the Sunni are the same. Again, we have the same names. And how can this be? And the lost tribes of Israel have the same names as those of the Akan people. So how can that be? It shows that the Akan people were actually, and God and some Hausa and so forth were there. And we know that the prophets were of these particular ethnic groups. And we know Jesus ﷺ was black, because how could it be if you have an explorer who came 400 years before, the people were jet black, mainly in color. And that didn't change, because we had Tacitus, who came hundreds of years after Herodotus, still talked about the region as being fundamentally black. And when Isa allegedly was killed, allegedly the Christian tradition, he was there, and he lived almost, because he lived to a ripe old age, he lived almost near 100 years after the death, which he wrote about. So this here gives you an indication, brothers and sisters, that Jesus belonged to it, because they had groups and tribes, and the city was very strong. You read on them, there's a lot of literature now. They were very, very strong. Very, very strong. And they belong to that. We have them today in the Akan, and you can find these lost tribes you find them there under this name and other names in the Khan language. They're there. So this is very interesting. The lost tribes of Israel, it's been fruitless to try to uncover it. There's been a lot of documentation and nobody can prove anything. We're still looking for them as we know today. See, so there's been fast ones pulled on us in the past, and we know that. Now, we're going to get to something, brothers and sisters. This is another indicator because the House of People, now we had a distractor here about a week ago or so. You tried to tell us because why? Because I know I got my enemy, they go in my computer and they get the documents out and they copy the documents and then they come on to the show here and try to talk. See, but because Subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what they are, they always get themselves exposed, even though they take my notes and they try to use the notes. So, and they tried to turn back around and say that the House of People were Europeans, or Tuba, which is not true. But the Hausa people, and you look, our Hausa brothers who are here and who will come in the future, you know your kingdoms and your cultural traits, especially of the kings, right, of Hausa land. You marry that up very similar to what happened in the times of the dynasties in Egypt, in Kemet, excuse me. The tying word to this, brothers and sisters, is this. On the doors of the king of the palaces, which you call of the kings, in the king's list and the kings of the dynasties, they used like a drawing or something that's been transposed from Shariki, which means the word of a king. They put on the door so that way you will know that this is a king. You entering a king's house or his palace or so forth and so on, right? This was derived from the Hausa word Shariki. This is the indicator that we know that the Hausa were kings even in Kemet in ancient times, because this word is transposed off the hieroglyphics on the doors of many of the pharaohs. See, this is it's just out and out fascinating, brothers and sisters. And to cover it up, the Europeans changed the wording around. See, but we know that this is it. And the House of Kingdoms, the kings, they have their customs and so forth. We know what Sharika is Shariki. We know it has something to do with Hausa. I start to learn Hausa language. We know it has something to do with kingdom, okay, king, okay, and it's a special class. This here, the Sharik, that they call that in the transposing of the Hausa word, is on the doors of the kings. This is a Hausa, again, Hausa contribution to the Kemet empires. So now you have evidence about that. See, this is very, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting, brothers and sisters. Again, the Hausa played a role. We had Hausa kings in the king's list, which we call Oti. You see on my chat, I showed you the word that we know that Oti is actually the name for the king's list, because the linguistics, brothers and sisters, is the most important thing, one of the most important things on the designation here in Africa. And you heard me talk 1,000 times. I've always harped on ethnic, the linguistic, and the areas and where they went, who they aligned with, because this is Africa. Kemet is no different. Ancient Kemet is no different. You have to understand the linguistics, okay? You have to understand that, and the ethnic, because Africa is the cradle of mankind. People went everywhere, and when they went everywhere, they separated, and they began to develop their own systems, cultures, languages, right? And they begin to change. That's why we have many different E series. That's why we have many different L series, because as people begin to separate, my son separates from me, he goes and starts his own family and clan 600, 700, 800 kilometers away from me, say for instance, or maybe further than that, 300, 400 kilometers away. Now he's developed his own. He's developed on his own language and so forth. He'll begin to change. And his antecedents will begin to change. This children, instead of me being E1B, my grandsons from him, who's living way over here now, may be EM7. You see? Because of the drift. This is what I'm talking about. But this here, brothers and sisters, is a good indicator on the Hausa people and so forth. They transpose this word here, which means entry, king, the king's entry, meaning going into the king's palace. We have this in Hausa that I know they may not use this today, but in yesteryears they did use this word shariki because it meant king, and of course we know that the housing. I don't know if it, because I never been to Nigeria. I don't know what was written on the doors or anything like this, but we know in Kemet this was an identifier. This came from the Hausa people. Very, very, very interesting, brothers and sisters. And we got a couple of comments here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes, my dear brother. Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. These are names. Again, brothers and sisters, I'm going to get into some of the translations for you here in a minute. So please bear with me on that, and you'll see, because a lot of times we're using the corrupted versions that the Europeans and the Arabs and others gave of the names. And as we start to uncover all this documentation, the Arabs, okay, and the Muslims, we have names, and so we changed some of that. We have European and American scientists who go and change it. So that's why today you'll find different names. Like Hotep, you'll see it spelled differently by different groups. See, but we know all of this comes from the Akan language. We know this. Okay, may the gods be satisfied, and may and this is something we should all work or have the hopes that all of us that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala will bless us, because we need this blessing on this continent, and hopefully, we know this is going to change. I'm hoping that even in my lifetime. Can you show the door symbol, please? I don't have that. I don't have it. There's a picture of it. I found it in I saw it in Google, but it didn't look good. It was in the British Library, one of their historical libraries. I can't remember now but it's there. It didn't show it real good, but they do have it. It's that is written, and it is proven. So this is definitely true. Okay, now also here, brothers and sisters, I want to show something again about the Fula people, how they played important role. We don't know which kings were Fula. We do not know for sure, but we know that we have evidence the Fula were great cattle herders. Okay, we know this, and farmers. We know this because we show pictures and we have diagrams on hieroglyphics showing them managing cattle. And we know they had to be great because they've been doing this for thousands of years. And Egyptians depended on them as a special class. They used this for wealth and so forth and so on. They used the cattle for wealth and for food and for milk and byproducts. Haven't we heard that before? As the same thing we need from the Fulani today. We need our milk from our brothers. We need cattle, leather. We need the byproducts, curded milk, cheeses, and so forth and so on, meat, okay, all of that. Even in ancient Kemet, they had the same reverence for cattle and for the herding. It was important. This is why they were given a special status, and the farmers were greeted, and of course they had to pay taxes, as you know. That's every year it's funny. You're going to have to pay taxes. Okay, you know you're not going to be able to get away with that. You're going to have to pay. You know, you're going to have to pay your taxes and so on. You can't get past that. We know this is something that we know that you know that it's been going on for thousands of years. Okay, no one's going to be able to get exempt from taxes. Everybody's going to pay taxes. I think the taxes are here to stay. And I don't know when we're going to stop to have to pay taxes. But even in the Kemet, you had to pay taxes. So you know, this is a part and parcel of our life as human beings as taxes. So you know, we can't get past that. So now, brothers and sisters, I'm going to get into names. Okay, I'm going to start here. Oh no, excuse me, brothers and sisters. I want to get into something here before I get to that, because I want to give you something. One of the most fascinating pharaohs or kings, Negos, in the Ge'ez language. We can never forget the Ge'ez is part of the ancient languages that were spoke in that region. My ancestor, Shabaka, see, had this name here. But we know him in the Akan language, as you see here. And in different groups, this means king, the chosen one, chosen by Oten. Oten is the god that was used at that time. Oten means, you know, the one God, you know, Tohid. And there's the word Yah. Who uses that today? Yahweh. It was the corruption of that. It comes from Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, from the Khan people who they describe Subhanahu wa Ta'ala as Yah. It was transposed by the Jews and so forth and Christians to Yahweh. Also, we know they talk about in the Hebrew and Arabic text, this means the strength of Allah. This is this name here, which I descend from him. Way, way, way back. But this is the Khan name. I want to give you that to show you, brothers and sisters, that Egypt was ours back then and is still ours today, irrespective of who tries to denounce us and tries to take it from us. You cannot. Every time you try to do something, you bring up this. How my great ancestor, Shabaka. See? And when you talk about things, ornaments that's on the door, they in hieroglyphics, the sharik. Okay, this is how it's pronounced. But Shariki is the Khan name, meaning the same thing. It means the king. It means the king, but it means like an entry to go inside the king's palace. And they had this sign up there. All of this type of thing goes to show you the linguistics, how important it plays in the showing the blackness of the land. And again, the linguistics that was used, Kemet means black itself. So our brothers 4,000, 5,000 years ago was nationalistic too. Okay, and they used the word Kemet to describe themselves and their land. As we know in Egypt, and we call Misrine, there's a lot of different names they use for Egypt, but we called it Kemet. See, very, very interesting, brothers and sisters. Very, very interesting. And we're going to cover this here, and I'll be closing here shortly, pretty soon here. The Prime Minister of Israel, his paternal father has this name here, that's a Khan. And we have the Khan people and this tribe that's still floating around in Ghana and parts of Togo today. Netanyahu. When you combine the term, people use that to show they came from this because their mom came from this, from Nyaho, and Nete, okay, and they take the name Netanyahu. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting, isn't it, brothers and sisters? Netanyahu is the name that is used by the Prime Minister of Israel. And as you see the other names, I'll get into some of I gave you some the other day. These show you, and I gave you how the Jews became the Jews. I gave you that story. I won't get into that because you go back to my take a couple of days ago to give you that. But I want you to give you that because I didn't put it into the thing last week or 2 days ago. Netanyahu. This is Netanyahu's ancestral name, but they just combined it. So that right there should tell you something, my dear brothers and sisters, that the Jews still are carrying our names. And it's a very fascinating topic. And we see we got here, okay, you have a West African. You know what? I'm finished with you. I'm finished. This guy is a provocateur, and he's gone. I won't even give him time of day. You read what he said there. I've been getting this even in my private thing. They sent me some things. This is the Tubab, because again, you know, brothers, sisters, you know, as you heard me say many times before about this issue, I have, you know, here in Morocco, it's not the Moroccan people. Yes, they use Moroccans as proxies. And these are the same as the slave catchers way back hundreds of years ago when they were enslaving. They could not perpetrate the crimes here on this continent. Okay. Brothers and sisters, I'm sorry. My enemy just disconnected. And, you know, this is going to be a problem, as you can imagine. And this guy who I've just removed, I removed him out, but I'm having a hard time removing him. So that goes to show you he's one of my enemies and how they're connected with YouTube. I'm tired of this with YouTube. And he's also with with SteamYard. They have a lot of problems with their security, because if these two Bob bastards can do this, they can break through the system, and they have their own servers. They can watch. They know what these people are doing. See, and it's very interesting, and it's wrong. But let me. And you know, they went in here and erased a lot of my stuff too, brothers and sisters. So when they took me out, they went into my system here and erased a lot of the notes and everything that I had in here. They erased them. Okay, well, that's okay. That's okay. Here we go. Here, I told you about this Netanyahu. This is again the prime minister. This is his name, and these are clans of the of the of the Akan people. I want to give you something too, brothers and sisters. You know, in ancient times in Kemet, when our black brothers begin to encounter Europeans, okay, the Tubab, they begin to encounter them. They begin to develop names for them. And those names were found on documents describing those who came across in the ocean. And they described many of the Greeks as some have red hair, reddish brown hair. They came in animal skins. They described them in hieroglyphics. They described these people who came across. The first time they start to see them, they came across from the ocean onto land. They had animal skins. Okay, it's not like the glamorous movies that we see today. They take the most beautiful girls and handsome men, and they play them. They actually were in animal skins. Some had reddish brown beards. They described them very pale skin, and they described them very, very well. One of the things, one of the words that was used, and I'm gonna give it to you now, and this is very interesting, and this designates the Europeans under in the hieroglyphics that they found. This is very interesting. Again, and it was changed to mean, yeah, okay, there we go. This here, brothers and sisters, was one of the terms that's in the Akan language, but they changed some of it around to talk about European people. It wasn't derogatory, but this is because when they begin to talk to the Greeks and the Romans, when they start to come, especially the Greeks when they come, because the Greeks were the first one to come, if I remember right, they asked them where they were from. And again, as we always say, it's not easy when you don't speak the language, and when you hear them say, like in Japanese, you ask the person, you know, and he'll tell you how to say, my name is so and so. You speak English, so you change the name, you know, because you can't pronounce it, so you change it around. Our brothers had a name for the Europeans, so they coined this word here for Europeans as they encountered them when the Greeks landed in Kemet for the first time, because our people wrote, and we wrote history. We were very good at that. See, so I wanted to give you that evidence again, also, my dear brothers, to show you that Egypt is ours. Egypt is ours. And I'm hoping, brothers and sisters, that you got something out of this today. And I also want to cover something else too, and I will be closing here. There's something else too I wanted to talk about. When the Greeks begin to come, they begin to talk about the scholarship, okay, also of the Egyptians. They talked about, and they wrote about the Greek historians wrote about how we had all of this ideology, and they talked about the religious doctrines that became the Christian documents, okay, the Bible as we understand that. And they talked about how it was created by black people in the land of black people. This is what the Greeks wrote at the time when they encountered us in Kemet. And they were most fascinated by the doctrines of ideology, about religion, doctrines, and also about other, they even mentioned here, they talked about different ethnic groups. Everybody was cataloged because everything was written in Kemet. They were so literate that everything that happened, when they had storms, they had famine, they had flooding, they wrote about it. And they kept it in libraries. So you can go, the future generations come into the library. This is how advanced our people were. You can go to the library and you can pull up documents of what happened 3 years, 1,000 years before. You will find those documents there. And the Greeks talked about that. And the Greeks talked about, they said that the documents were created by black people in a land of black people for black people. This is the Greeks were talking about when they encountered us in Kemet. They were so fascinated by us. We talked about them looking primitive because we talked about them in animal skins. It's written in documents. In animal skins and, kind of half naked with reddish brown long beards. They described the Greeks very well. So I just wanted to give you that, this part here to tell you about that. And the scientists began to realize that the biblical ideology came from the ancient Kemites. No doubt about that. Many Greeks, many Europeans today know this, even American scientists, but many are still very, reticent to talk because of the campaign, the vicious campaign against black people has been so vicious that many of them can't come out to say that Kemet was a black civilization. They just cannot. Some are doing it, and you notice what happened when they wrote books. Gary Greenberg's book, The Moses Mystery, what happened? My esteemed professor who I was friends with, who's now passed on, he talked about Greenberg because we worked with Greenberg, and he was a Jewish scientist. He talked about what happened to him when he went against the Jewish lobby who told him you shouldn't publish that because they want to keep this lie going. He said, I cannot do it. I'm a scientist. I have to present the facts as it is. And when he argued with so-called scholars of Judaism, he said, where did we come from? They could not give him an answer. When they said Europe, he said, no, it's not the case. If you are the chosen people, if you carry that gene, he says, why is your genes linked to Europe? But the original Jews are not linked to Europe, but they're linked to Africa. They didn't want to hear that. It's really sad. Very, very sad, brothers and sisters. It's very, very sad epitaph. And so I gave you that. Wait a minute. Matter of fact, wait a minute, brothers and sisters. Excuse me for a minute here. I got to give you, I hope they didn't. Okay, I got to put it back in here. Now we're going to get into some of the things. I will close. Brothers and sisters, this is some of the names here of the Egyptian, the names are transposed. These are the Khan words for the names of many that's on the Ote. Ote is what? The king's list. This is in the language of the Khan that was used in ancient times. When they say Ote, Ote means the king's list. This is some of the names here that you know. Neo. This is the names that was taken from the language of the Khan people who were running this region for a long time, and then others began to come in. I told you the Hausa became kings later. You had Fulani people begin to come in there as well. So you had other ethnic groups begin to come in, and then they begin to use their words. But I want you to look at number 1 under here, pyramid. The hieroglyphics point to some of the reasons how they shaped it. We have many talks about this word pyramid and why it was shaped the way it was shaped. We understand some of it meaning like it's like a sword end, like a sword head. So when we translate the documents, we found the word pira me, okay, like a sword. So this is the names that was given in ancient time for the pyramids. They didn't call it pyramids. Pyramids is a European English concoction. They took the word and they changed it to pyramid, but the name that was transposed was Pira Me. See, Pira Me this is what they translated from. You see all these names that the Greeks, the Romans, and other historians begin to change the names and butcher the African names, but butcher these names. This is just some of it, brothers and sisters. Here, these are the real names that we found that was written in hieroglyphics in the Khan language way back, showing again that Egypt was ours. And they tried to hide this by creating different names, changing the names, so that way they would not be able to uncover our African history. and then they'll be able to say that the Europeans was controlling the destiny of Messer, when in fact, I mean of Kemp, when in fact it wasn't. Here's another list here. Now, you take a look at Moses alayhi salatu salam there. Moses to your left. Okay, Yao Mosa. Also, brothers and sisters, I'll give you another one if you saw it. I don't know if I have it in here or not, in the names. Also, Moses alayhi salatu salam had the name Tutu as well. See, Tutu means king, ruler. We know that. So this is the contention that was given also, brothers and sisters, that Moses alayhi salatu salam, we know was picked in the royal family. We know this, but he also might have had the title Tutu, which is a Khan. See, we know that. So now here is here's Nefertiti. Now you see, I told you the name that my ancestor had is very similar. Look at the name, is what they called her in that they found. Again, we always use the Greek interpretation of Nefertiti and so forth and so on. But we know also that she descended from outside, but from Black people. And this is the names that we know her to have. So now you see that. Osiris, remember I told you before, remember we talked about the Osiris chain that the Kemites had. They had the knowledge of the solar system. Remember Osiris, remember I told you that? And also, remember the doggone people who, again, I have part of that heritage. Remember, it's them who not discovered, but talked about the Sirius system, right? And it was later discovered in the 1800s that they told the truth. So this is some of the evidence, brothers and sisters, that I have, and you can look at this. And here we got, again, now, you look at the word here, you go to see King Tut, King Tutu, Ose Tutu. These are the names we found written in our esteemed professor who got all these documents, the King's List, and got to translate these documents, and he began to translate these names. He found the Greek transposing these names again. Now, if you look over here, it says Osir Khan 1. Not there, but look at the name here, Queen Mother. Mary. Yes. This is what's very fascinating about this. This name is the name of, we suspect, the name of Mary, as you know him in English, mother of Jesus alayhi salam. We know her as Miriam in the Arabic language and in the Quranic Arabic. But we know that in the Khan language, we see here her name was Mary. Okay, you see what I mean? All the stuff we found uncovered, brothers and sisters, we uncovered all of this. And this is a very, very, very compelling argument that Egypt is ours, and this is the linguistics here. Over to your left is the butchering of the African languages, the Ga, the Khan, the Hausa, the Igbo, the Fulani, all the names that we had, they butchered those names and to make them European. And then this is the last of the list here that I have. There's more, but I just wanted to show you. Now you can see there's all of these names here of many of the kings, and their names on the king's list, what we call Oti. And you see many, and this is the names that they actually are their names. Over to your right. This is actually the names of those kings that were running Egypt at Kemet at that time. And this is how they were transposed to your left. And this is the real names to your right. And this is why all of this, brothers and sisters, is so fascinating and whatnot. And, and there's a lot of other documentation, which I'm going to save for another time. I got one more presentation on this because we have Eid Kabir coming up for the Muslims, and it's coming up very fast. So everybody's got to get prepared for that. And so I'll probably give one more, inshallah, bi'ithnillah, one more lesson about ancient Egypt and whatnot, and so forth. And I'm hoping, brothers and sisters, today that you saw these documentation and you understand and so forth. And I give you a recap again on this. The Fula people, we know here they came in the green here. This is a recap, and this is for those who just showed up late. We have a recap talking the Fula. They originated, we know, out of the cradle of mankind, down in the green here, and they went. We know, and we have conjecture now from many scientists to believe that the Fula went up through Egypt and crossed into Jazira Arab thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, right? Okay. Then in the blue, they left the Middle East to come back into Kemet, which you know is Messer. When the Exodus happened, we know the Fulani people then in the red began to go to North Africa, to the Sahel corridor. They began to coastal West Africa. They began to go south, all the way back down to all the way into Mozambique. We even heard that we have Fulani people also was recorded even down in Azania, which is South Africa. So we know, and they traveled, and they have different names. They didn't call them Futafola or Faleta. We have different names. Muboro, they all these names like this, they call the Fulani people. They have different names down to the south. But this is what I wanted to show, that how we got to ancient Egypt, and that we were the caretakers of the cattle and so forth and so on. We have diagrams of the depictions of what they found in the hieroglyphics. We suspect, and we have most likely, that the Fula people, because we're trying to get names too, that we know that the old Fula language. And also I had one indication that the names that some were used, the names that they came out are very similar to the Messina dialect. That's probably why I love the Messina dialect so much. It's so ingrained in me. I want to learn the Messina dialect. But they believe that many of the things that the Fula people had in ancient times in Kemet, they had names for cattle, they had different names they used, and they said it was remnants of that you find with, again, just like the Akan, we find the hieroglyphics, we find the Akan. We have names that's more related to the Messina Fulfulde dialect that's coming out of Mali. It's very fascinating, brothers and sisters, very, very fascinating, to say the least, and whatnot. And I'm hoping, brothers and sisters, that you guys got something out of this. And then the recap on the Hausa, our Hausa brothers, you should be very proud. You have a link to the Fula, with your Fula brothers in Kemet. We know that I hope they didn't take it out here. I got to put it back in here. Okay. We know that we found the Hausa word that the Greeks took from the hieroglyphics and they butchered it by calling it Sarik. Okay. They call this, but we know in the Hausa language it was called Sariki, meaning king. This name here, Sharik, they transposed off the doors of many of the palaces of the pharaohs, right? They had that to designate, to show you that this is the place where the king lived, and this is his door. So they had an inscription on the door. See, and so this is something again to show our Hausa brothers. Our Hausa brothers were kings because we had symbols put, and they used these symbols in ancient Kemet on the doors of many of the kings during the Ote. The Ote is the king's list of all the kings and the history and so forth of Kemet. So we have that evidence to show you who, our Hausa brothers were an integral part of Kemet, as well as your Fulani brothers and others too. As we know, the Ga people, we know the Mende people were there. The Mende script is one of the most famous scripts we know. We know the Mende people were there in Egypt because we have their DNA, which is EM, I forgot now, which destination they come out, but we know the Mende. The Mende has a beautiful script that's very remnant of the original of the hieroglyphics. We know the Mende script is very famous. So we all of West Africa, we're ancient Egyptians, period. So anybody is wondering how we got to West Africa, who were we? Now we understand. And last on this is the Fula people, there's been conjecture because a lot of trying to say because many Fula people have very light skin and they have different features than most of the West Africans and other people they encounter, right? Well, one scientist was saying he found some DNA from the Europeans. I'm not shocked to that. I'm not shocked at that. I'm gonna tell you why. If you remember something about, I gave you history about the Fula people. What about all this jihad? When the Fula people began to come in earnest in the Sahel region, right? They became Muslims. They began to go west to spread Islam all the way to Senegal to the Takrur region, right? This began the stronghold to the point because of the power of the people in that region. The Arabs and others began to call every black person they encountered Takruni because they assumed that we're all from the one area. It's not derogatory. It was a term for respect. And so now, when we look at all of these things, the Fula people in jihad went where? Into modern day Spain, what we call Andalus. When you saw my program, who did they mix with? White women, right? And it created people called Melungeons. When the breakup of the Islamic sultanates in the 1400s, where did those people go? They went back into Morocco, right? Think about that. Now they're mixed already Fulani and with European blood, okay? To our blood, right? They begin to mix again with Fulani. As they start going further south, they begin to mix again with Fulani. That's why many Fulani, especially the Western corridor, remember I told you you got Amazigh blood. And many of them are light-skinned because after all of the mixing happened, okay, because as our brothers began to go into trek, they found very light-skinned Amazigh women who were descended from Andalus, whose mother was what? Spanish, and father was Sinique or with the Wolof or Fula or something like this, right? So they came to mix back into Africa. That's why it shows that there's some European elements in there. It's not because there was some kind of legendary white group that came into West Africa and settled. That's not the case. They begin to mix with people in the north who are already having mixture from the Romans and from the Spaniards, as we understand that. That's how we got that. I thought that was very fascinating, and we should remember that as full of people as well. The other people don't have this particular because they didn't float up to the north and travel like the Fula people did. Some did, yes, but as a general rule, we made our way all the way up into Andalus as Mujahideen soldiers fighting, and we stayed there and we ruled and lived there from 711 all the way to 14, I forgot now, middle 1400s. So Fula people were there, and they mixed a lot with the white women, and then the mixtures that occurred, they came back, and that's why they're showing this European heritage there. And I want to get that clear. And there's one more last thing too on this. I wanted to give you this information. Okay, yeah. Now, why I know this is going to hurt some people, but I'm going to put this in here again. The Europeans have talked a lot about. They've changed the name of to Jehovah and so forth and so on, but we know that they transposed the documentation of like, and even our Hebrew rulers, they used the word Yahweh. We know that, right? We know this. Okay, we know this word here is used. We know this. It's used. Okay, this is used. Okay, we know that. But I want to give you something that when they found the hieroglyphics, and when they began to decipher this, they found the name that they let to mislead us by calling, okay, what the Jews call God. Okay, in Arabic we call Allah. The Jews say Yahweh. But where did Yahweh come from? This is the term that was pushed on to the Jews and Christians, because the reason why I say that is because when they found the actual name that was used by the original the original Jews and Jews and Hebrews, as you know them today, I mean, as you know them in the past, this is the term that was used that they found. These word here became, again, became Yahweh, and to shorten it up, they use Yah. I'm hoping my Hebrew brothers get hold of this and they look at this and check my evidence about this, because this is what you should know. This came out from the Khan language, and the white Jews and the white historians want to take Africa away from the modern Jew, but because when the white Jews began to go, 1,000 years ago, came into the region, they were new. They came to the region. They were converts. They began to change things around, and they called Yahweh Yah. But the names that was transposed, as you notice, was this. This is the name that was used and said by the original Jews. This name here became this. So I want to give you that, brothers and sisters, so you can see that. And I'm hoping our Hebrew brothers and sisters see this and they start doing their research on this and get and look. And we have one scientist, last name Rattray, he did a study about the same thing. When they uncovered the biblical documents and stuff like that, they found this word meaning Yahweh, meaning the same as Yahweh that the Israelis used. So they changed it to Yahweh in order to cover up their African history, because they didn't want this exposed. See, and it's a fascinating thing, brothers and sisters. Okay, very fascinating, and it's unfortunate. Again, why we have people that make it. It's been for thousands of years, and we have scientists today to know the truth that Egypt is ours, Kemet is ours, but they're still today fighting this, and even all this evidence of scholarship, even by now, rightful Tubab scholars who are bringing forth, they are finally admitting, many of them in their documents, but this stuff is still being pushed aside. And when you go to school, these same old talking heads who are racist, calling us Negroes, I've heard about this. I've heard about some universities in the United States, some of these racist professors still want to call us Negroes. I mean, it's bad. And he'll say this and that, and they still kind of cover it. Remember, I told you when I was in school in the United States, I remember at university level, before I got to the African professors, I had to shut my mouth. I could not talk, because for me to pass, I had to listen to these racist professors, right, in order to get a grade. And I had to swallow my pride, knowing they were wrong. When they said Negro, I wanted to take them to task. I couldn't. And when they start talking about we were nothing but monkeys and with bananas, and that we had no civilization until they came, I had to swallow my pride and put that down on the test paper so I can get out of there. See, so this is, again, brothers and sisters, I mean, this is, damning evidence against our detractors that Egypt is ours. And there's so many different things here that I'm going to cover in the next time. And I'll get into something a little quite different. But this is for our brothers too who are studying about Kemet. This is a deeper analysis about Kemet. And you may not find this a lot, because a lot of people don't talk about this, and many people cannot talk about this. But I'm giving this to you today, brothers and sisters, so you can have it. You can take it and run with it, and you can look at it and then go from there. Because I want all of us to have this. Again, my talk is unorthodox because I don't follow this script. And I'm not going to sit here and glorify no Tubab. Okay, I will not. And I'm not going to go kiss their feet and keep this lie going about Kemet is white and all this. And again, brother, sister, if you look at, I gave you all the evidence, and I hope they didn't remove it. Here, I'm recapping that part of it. Where is it? Oh man, I think they took it. Boy. I gotta let me because I have my notes back here. Let me put that. Okay, here we go. I'll put it back in. These identifiers, brothers and sisters, is you use this. You go back, take notes off this, do your research. This here is unequivocal. They can't fight you. They can only argue with you, and they try to present. When they bring you the mummies from the ancient Egyptians, I mean, of the Romans who were there at the time, you can fight them off with the DNA evidence. You can fight them off with the melon test. When they tested those grave sites of the Romans, their test score was low for melon, because white people have low melon. They don't need it because they don't have to encounter the hot sun. Africa, you need it. So you got high melon in your skin, right? That testing, the hair testing also disproved that the ancient Egyptians were white. And again, you have to look at that in linguistics. We look at the languages. Now, how did these whites suddenly come in this region here and they speak African dialects? It don't make sense. And if you look at it again, how did they stay white for centuries upon centuries? See, it doesn't make sense. If they intermarried, and we know they had concubines. So even the Greek rulers who came in, they're going to have sex with black women. You know that. And they're going to produce children. So how did this population stay lily white all the way up to the date? Impossible. It didn't happen, brothers and sisters. We got the hieroglyphic evidence. We got the eye testimony from Herodotus himself. The hieroglyphics, they got Kemet, meaning black. That's there. Talking about themselves and their land. Talking about this is the land of black people, Kemet. Okay, the black lands. This is black people, Kemet. You heard what the Roman, one of the Roman scientists talked about what he uncovered when he got there to Egypt. He now all the scholarship he thought was white. He said it was made by blacks for black people in black people's land. That's what he said about Kemet. So there's more evidence, brothers and sisters, to show you Egypt is ours. And I gave you that today. And I'm hoping that you run with this and you do your research and stand up, brothers and sisters. Stand up. This is your history. We're uncovering this together here. This is your history. See, this is your history. And they give you something that you can cling on, because this continent was taken from you. You live on this continent, but your history is taken. Only thing that you know more about is about, now, traditional African religions. They push that. And they talk about slavery, they talk about things we've done wrong. That they push. But our scholarship and everything else, they don't push that. They keep that silent because they want you to stay in this sorry state without a history. We're the only people on this earth where the history is no good. Either it's non-existent or it's no good. But now I gave you scholarship. The greatest civilization in mankind history was Kemet, and it was ours. Remember that, brothers and sisters, and use this evidence and other evidence by doing your research, and you run with that and be proud and stand up. See, and stand up that you know that your ancestors were ancient Kemites, and you know that you carry the E series and the LO series as well on the paternal, because we know this. Okay, so brothers and sisters, don't take a back seat to nobody. Be proud of your heritage. Okay, but be even killed. Don't be a braggart like the Europeans have done. Don't claim that you're superior to anybody else. You're not. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave all of us something, and he took something from us. But we have had centuries of being told that we're nothing. So we're now recovering this history back to instill, put us back into the human race, that we weren't monkeys jumping out of trees with a banana in our mouth. And we weren't nothing until the Europeans got here. We were something. We had the greatest civilization on this earth. Okay. And we have the languages. We have the languages that deciphered. We have the hieroglyphics. We have our people deciphering the documents. And now we know where the stuff came from. We know where all these names came from. In the King's List, remember it's called OT. This name is called OT. That's the name of it. I put it in the chat for you so that you will have that evidence. Okay, brothers and sisters. I must conclude now with that, and I'm hoping that you catch me here in a couple of days or so, and right before we have Eid Kabir, which is coming here, I think Monday, and it's closing after that. I'm going to close down. I won't be doing anything for a while for celebration for our holidays, which is a couple of days, but there's things go on, and I'll take a break because I've been doing a lot of studying as usual, and writing a lot of notes and everything. So my dear brothers and sisters, please stay safe out there, and you know, and stand up. Don't be ashamed, and like I said, get your history down so that way you can have your discussions. And even on those days that you want to debate, you now have evidence to debate. And we have unequivocal evidence that they cannot get past. And I gave that list of 5. They cannot get past that. So I'll leave you with that. Salam alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.